Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we're going to be talking about accelerated farms. Is this something that you should be prioritizing? Like, how does this fit into, hey, should I go after this, should I not? Like, does the accelerated shard rate make a massive difference? Obviously, but should you only be focused on those things, and then once you've farmed everything that's accelerated, then you go into the single drop stuff? How do you make that fit into your plan? And I want to give a shout out here to, and this was Brewster the Blaster, for bringing this up on the farming priorities. And he said, the one thing I didn't hear was accelerated or not. I prioritize accelerated over the ones that are not. It's an additional cost to the layer of the farm. And I think that's a very good point. However, I want to make sure that you guys understand that accelerated shard rates need to be viewed very differently in the farming priorities, because that goes into the total time it will take to farm something. That, are you going to be able to farm Leia faster because her stuff is accelerated, or would you be able to get Balin faster? Like, you know, those are two separate things. So we're going to kind of talk through this accelerated versus non-accelerated, the factors to consider, and how you can best work through them to be successful in this game. So let's please give a shout to our channel members and like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. To my channel members, thank you guys again for your continued support. If you're ever interested, y'all know where that link is. It's down below, along with a link to Discord server. Please go check it out. And if you're a channel member, please make sure you join that Discord server. There's so much going on there, and it's a lot easier for me to handle things inside of that Discord. So please make sure you guys are using that as much as you can. Let's get into our video here. Let's talk about accelerated shard rates. Alright folks, so accelerated shard rates became a thing in, I believe, 2020, right? It came about the 5th anniversary of the game we got accelerated shard rates. And for the longest time, all I did was farm accelerated stuff. I didn't worry about anything that wasn't accelerated. It just wasn't worth my time to do that. I avoided them like the plague, hence Night Sisters. No, like seriously, like I really focused on just building the accelerated characters. But for a very long time, you think for over 2 years in the game with these accelerated characters, we didn't have a change in the raid. We didn't have a change in territory battles, and the conquest feats weren't all about just having these new things. The game has changed a lot in the time period that we got these accelerated characters, the new raid system, and so with that, the need for you to sometimes farm newer characters or spend time farming things that aren't accelerated has absolutely increased. And so it's not that you necessarily, like, that you only farm the new stuff, but you also can't just only farm it. So in some cases, avoiding an accelerated farm can be really smart. Think about something like General Syndulla and the Spectre units. Unless you are going to be going after GL Ahsoka Tano, it doesn't make sense to build up the Spectre team here. It's not going to make sense to farm them unless Ahsoka is literally the next thing you're going to farm. You're going to spend a ton of time farming them, and unless as soon as you get them, you're building Ahsoka, I don't want to say you're wasting your time, but you could have farmed a 2-time shard and, you know, made more progress in your account, right? Similar situation even with, like, Gungans here, right? We go back to the Gungans that, you know, Boss Nass, unless you're building Jar Jar right away, it doesn't make sense just to farm the shards for the Gungans. Like, farm the things that you're going to actively work on, right? And especially with the raid sunsetting now, I don't know that it's the smartest decision to be farming something like the Gungan units, right, with Battle for Naboo kind of going away. But in other cases, it's not so smart to ignore newer farms. Think about the Imperial Remnants with Enoch and Night Trooper and Death Trooper Peridia. With these characters, farming them unlocks an assault battle. They're also Galactic Legend requirements, but they work together really well. And you compare that to the Spectre team, and while the Spectre team is good, their literal only use is with GL Ahsoka. Like, you can run that team. I don't know how good it is without Ahsoka there, so someone will have to tell me if I'm wrong. But you compare that to what the Imperial Remnants can do, where Enoch can go under Dark Trooper Moff Gideon and make that team really friggin' good. And then you have Night Trooper and Death Trooper Peridia, who have the Night Sister tag that can go under Great Mothers. They have a lot more uses. They're very versatile. And then even think about the Great Mothers and Morgan. That Night Sister team is so good. So farming Morgan and Great Mothers could allow your roster to really progress well, because it's two characters who, yes, while not accelerated, make a massive impact, and, you know, low Zetas, you know. So in some cases, I would completely agree that go farm an accelerated thing. You're going to get more benefit out of it. But in other times, it doesn't make sense to ignore something that's new when it's extremely beneficial to your account. Remember, context is everything. Me just sitting here saying Great Mothers or Captain Enoch are good is nothing if I don't put the context in it that for some of your accounts, you've kind of got to be ready for that. Remnants is a lot easier for me to say, hey, it's a good thing to invest in because like the three of them work really well together. With the Great Mothers team, if you don't have those extra Night Sisters, not really worth building them. But if you have those extra Night Sisters, I would not be ignoring them. They are really that good. But the other thing that I want to say, and I just have this conspiracy theory about the new characters, and I have nothing to back this up. Like, there's no data, right? But it's just by feel. The drop rates I get on Shin and Merrick are actually kind of insane. That, like, I feel like I get really good drops out of them. I'm not saying that they're, you know, oh, I'm getting 5 a day. Like 5, you know, drops of 5 at a time. But it's pretty consistent that I'm getting a couple of shards of them a day. And I'm doing refreshes, and it's still, like, I feel pretty good. Like, I'm getting, you know, 3 drops and 2 drops. And so my argument here is that these new characters, it's not as slow to get them as you think. Like, it's not like it's going to take you a year to go from 0 to 330 on a single drop farm. And you're already starting ahead. If you went and were there for the marquee, you know, for the marquee events, you're starting ahead. You're getting extra shards through that event. So it is a lot faster to farm them than many players realize. And so I'm not saying that, oh, they make the drop rates crazy good, but I would not be shocked if CG behind the scenes isn't saying, hey, we're going to give these guys like a 25% drop rate, and then when they become an accelerated rate, it'll effectively be like a 40% or something. Like, it just, the drops feel really good for single drop characters. I've been noticing that something, and it's just this new Toon conspiracy that they increase the drop rates to kind of help you, give you a incentive to farm them early. Again, nothing to base that off of, nothing to found that off of. I'm sure that I would get more of, like, I forget which one shares the note. I think it's Merrick here. I'm sure I get more Mother Talzin shards than I do of Merrick, but it feels better. And maybe that's something that has increased over time, that in the past it wasn't as good, but you'll farm these a lot faster than you realize. So don't think that it takes an insane amount of time. It's a pretty quick process all the same. But here's the other side of this equation to figure out. Is your Kyrotech, are your Zetas and Signal Datas keeping pace with all the new stuff that you're doing, right? Or all like the accelerated things that you're doing. When you're farming an accelerated character, yes, core gear is accelerated, but Kyrotechs aren't, Zetas aren't, and Signal Data isn't. So one farm to one farm, maybe it's not as big of a deal to you. That like you got all the shards, you put the Kyrotech on and you feel good. Hell, maybe even for 2 shards, right? For 2 farms, it's still pretty consistent, right? That you, you know, all right, I kept pace, but then maybe for the 3rd time that you're going for that next thing and you realize, crap, I have all these shards, but I don't have any Kyrotech to put on them. I don't have Zetas. I don't have, you know, the Signal Data. And that's where you have to understand that those accelerated farms are only as good as your pacing with these resources is. If you're churning through those accelerated shards, you're churning through them, but you don't have the resources to equip there, maybe you've either got to pull back and farm more Kyrotech, or pull back and try to figure out where you can, you know, increase your Zetas or Signal Data so that way you're matching pace. And one of the pieces of advice I would have is that when you're farming these newer things, yes, your shard progress is slower, but you are allowing yourself more time to farm the Signal Data if they're not a Cantina character, right? If they're a Cantina character, you know, sucks to suck. But let's say they're not a Cantina character. You're allowing yourself more time to get their Signal Data, more time to accumulate Zetas and Kyrotech to use on that team. So there is an element here that at times it doesn't take quite as long to farm a team of new characters because you're also accumulating more resources during that time. If you don't believe me here, let me show you this example I have. I set this up a while ago. So this is a Google sheet that I have. I track a bunch of things on here. And one of the things I had done was shown math, right? So this math here is saying, all right, if I was to just assume a 30% drop rate on Kyrotech based on 60 energy, right? For, you know, me to farm 1,000 Kyrotech with, again, just spending 60 energy, comparing that to a character, right? Just comparing that to a character, it's going to take me like 200 days. Right? Do you follow that logic that if I was just looking at, hey, I'm going to farm a 60 energy node instead of farming Kyrotech, like if I'm going to farm the Kyrotech instead of farming an extra character, between my daily login, right? Your daily login and all this stuff, it's going to take you roughly 208 days to get 1,000 Kyrotech. If you flip that over and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to farm a ship or a character that isn't accelerated, and I assume that same 30% drop rate on shards. It's going to take me 220 days to accumulate the 330 shards I need. So, I'm going to spend 220 days farming a character. Well, in that time, I've accumulated 600 Kyrotech from my daily logins. Now, again, you could say, oh, well, you're going to get those whether you farm Kyrotechs or characters. Yes. The point I'm trying to make is that that's a lot of extra Kyrotech. Right? That's a lot of Kyrotech that okay, I can, get here naturally. And then if I wanted to farm 1,000 Kyrotech, I still would only need to get to, an extra 70 days with this energy. And so this whole thing is showing that even, you flip that over for a single character to 2 times, you're only, you're saving like 50 days, or I guess 40 days here between, a 2 times character, because while the character's getting there faster, you're not earning as many Kyrotech along the way. That's the whole point that this was trying to show at the time, is that while you can get the characters faster, and this is just showing daily login, Kyrotech, right? This isn't taking into account any other farming you're doing, but it still portrays that picture really well, I think, that the more time you're spending on something, the more time you have to accumulate other resources, not just from logging in, but think about the raids and territory battles, conquest. If it takes you, 3 months to farm something versus, say, 6 months, in those 6 months, think of all the additional resources you've built up, and that can maybe help you prioritize and say, hey, you know what? Farming this non-accelerated team, by the time I get there, I'll have all this stuff, I'll be able to use them right away, and I'll get immediate benefit. You've got to remember that this game now is rewarding you for building new stuff. Not just in, I know Conquest is over now, but think about, the assault battles for, again, we don't have anything going on right now, but we just had Duel of the Fates and Peridia, but think about, the territory battles, right? There's the bonus planets that they gave out that came into existence. Think about the raid, right? That by the time this raid sunsets, Gungans and I think Queen Amidala, the Queenie and Sweeties, at least the Sweeties, they will be accelerated. So there was a, immediate benefit that by having those characters, you were able to score more points in the raid, which netted you more resources. So, that's, again, just thinking of those resources, it can make sense to maybe go after a non-accelerated character, so that way you're able to more so keep pace with the resources you need. And then finally, don't forget your mods. Through all of this, you've got to think about the modding. And modding, again, I always kind of hold separately because it's very different. In this example here, if you're trying to build, say, Inquisitors, characters for the Cal Kestis mission and team, and maybe the Mandalorians for Bo-Katan, instead of maybe focusing on your remnants, just for the sake of argument, because, remnants aren't accelerated, this other stuff is. In the time that you're going to build all those things and accumulate all those characters, do you have the mods for them? And not just do you have mods, but are they good? Because otherwise, you get out of whack. You get out of pace. This whole thing could almost be summed up by what the Lightspeed bundles have done. They move your relic and gear progression timeline up significantly, but they keep your mod and Zeta thing back here. They don't progress you in that category. At least, now they're kind of progressing a little bit in the Zetas, but, in the mod category, it's staying stagnant. And it's the same thing with an accelerated shard rate. Yes, the core gear change happened, but Kyrotechs didn't change. Signal data, Zetas, mods did not change through all of this. So if those are your bottlenecks, if you're bottlenecked by something like Zetas and Kyrotech, farming something new isn't an awful idea if it means that you can accumulate more of those resources now, and then you're going to get a return on them. Sure, if you're going after, a Jabba or Leia, they offer a lot of really good resources, can make a huge difference to, your account. But let's say that you're trying to go free to play and farm Sith Eternal characters because they're accelerated. I don't know that that's the best decision. Not because, he's a galactic legend. Like, he's, like, the, I guess, 10th best character in the game now, right? Bane's better than him, and Ahsoka's better than him. You know, 10th best character, he's a galactic legend. Or even someone like General Skywalker. They're both very good characters, but they're not offering you an immediate return right now. You're not getting anything extra out of farming them. But farming some of the newer things that are in these economy events or inside of the raid can really help your account. So I want to, I hope this kind of all sums up into, don't be afraid to farm an accelerated character or team, because it may actually fit into your plans better than you think. The speed with which you accumulate shards may be a lot faster. And depending on what it is, you could really be benefiting your account in ways that you might not even be seeing for a little bit. Like when we first were building those Queen Amidala teams, when I first was building these two, I would have swore, I don't know that they were announced for the raid yet, but they were definitely announced for the assault battle or vice versa. Think about like Stap. I think I did the same thing. I started building that, and then it ended up being needed for the raid. Not that I use it, but we were ready for it. So I hope you guys kind of follow this logic that, like, yes, in some cases, farming this new stuff can really allow you to be on top of other things. Like, we knew the remnants were going to be needed for Ahsoka. We had no idea that they were going to get a special assault battle at some point. So anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts. I hope this helps you understand that, like, yes, to a certain extent, farming an accelerated node is better because you're going to get stuff faster and it'll be able to grow. But only to the extent that you're keeping pace with that. And if you aren't keeping pace, maybe cut off some of the shard farming or farm a newer thing for a little bit and get that immediate advantage to your account now. If you're still watching, Wampa is king in the comments, and then you get the last bit of advice here. My account started growing leaps and bounds when I started building these newer things. When I didn't just focus on accelerated farms and characters, that's when my account really began to jump to where you guys see it today. So if I can say that here and say that for you now, being a man or woman, shout out Allie, that is going to farm accelerated, that is going to farm some of this newer stuff, you can really get a lot more benefit and your account will grow faster. Not only because it's better than a lot of the stuff that exists in the game, but because there's extra resources attached to it. So there you go. I rambled enough. Let me know your thoughts. I love you all. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.